that's the logic. And I think that that's probably what happened, because he had an expectation of winning and it didn't happen. And therefore, there had to be a reason. And that's why I think some people could call it being delusional. I think it is just a human reaction to something where he does not admit the circumstances.
Yeah. You're pretty convinced he's going to run again, right?
I'm pretty convinced he is. Yeah.
You know, Bill Maher the other night, he was talking with Kellyanne Conway, who is a very bright woman. She took a lot of heat in the media, but she's a very bright woman. He was talking to Kellyanne, and he said, "We're going to lose our democracy if Donald Trump is elected." And Kellyanne was saying something. He says, "Yes, but he might come back." And Kellyanne said, "Well, the majority of people might want him." "That's just it. I don't trust the majority," he said. So within a course of about 1 minute or 30 seconds, he said, "We're going to lose our democracy," and then he doesn't trust the majority, which is the heart and soul of democracy: majority rule and minority rights. That's what a democracy is. I don't think Bill, who's a sharp guy, gets that.
Well, I think he does, but I think it's only the majority when, if let's go back to they pick and choose, as everybody does. They say, well, because we've won the last three popular votes, why don't we just get rid of the Electoral College and let the majority rule? And see, that's where the Democrats come down on that. They want to get rid of the Electoral College because they only need 13 states to win majorities in about 13 states, and they win the popular vote. And that is exactly why we have those checks and balances in place. I would argue that what we're talking about is not a democracy, but a constitutional republic, which then has the protection of the majority rule with the protection of minority rights. And that's what a constitutional republic is about. And democracy was not in fact, it was argued against in the Federalist Papers, and that's why we have the Constitution that we have, is because a democracy is a very dangerous form of government.
What do you mean it's a dangerous form of government?
Majority rule. There is no protection of minority rights.
Well, that's supposedly why a Supreme Court was added. If you listen to people today who believe that the Constitution expands and contracts with time.
But the Constitution doesn't expand or contract with time.
No, it doesn't.
If you're an original, that is only if you believe in a living, breathing Constitution. But that is not what for the first 150 years of jurisprudence, we did not have a living and breathing Constitution. We had an originalist Constitution, and there were some horrible decisions made along the way. But it was with the introduction of Justice Brandeis and others of that ilk that came along, and then certainly in the 1930s we saw the court flip in 1937, and we then saw, and we have seen since 1937, the ebb and flow of the originalist versus the living Constitution justices.
Well, you talked about that in your lectures on Western civilization a number of years ago, that because Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal was being checked by the Supreme Court at the time, he wanted to pack the court. So
Right.
Biden would be the second Democratic president who wants to essentially do away with the Supreme Court. Let's not make any mistake about it. That's what court packers want. They just want to get rid of the Supreme Court.
Well, what they do is they bring ideology, which is the most virulent and most dangerous aspect of politics, is ideological bent. That they bring ideology into the court as opposed to jurisprudence. The court was never intended to legislate. The court was always intended to measure the constitutionality of laws that were written or passed, whether Congress did its job or did not do its job. And what we see today is we don't see the court kicking laws back to the Congress to be fixed. What we see is legislation. The court tries to fix what the Congress screws up, and that's not the role of the court. The court should remand those decisions or those laws back to Congress to be fixed, and until they are fixed, those laws do not exist.
Sam Clovis is our guest. This is AM 1400 KBFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. Joe Biden and his people are out there just screaming about guns. You know, they're not they're pretty they're pretty shameless about it. That guns, and I can't say I'm quoting Biden directly. Guns should direct your vote this November. That's Biden's talking point. They should.
By God, I think he's right. I think it will direct mine.
So the Republicans now, at least 10 Republicans, which make the current effort to do something as far as increase of gun regulations, and I don't know what's in this new bill exactly, but it appears that new gun regulation is coming. Do you know anything about it?
Yes, I've not read the entirety of the bill. I've read the highlights because of course these bills are massive and they have hidden in them all kinds of issues. What apparently is the compromise here is that it deals with encouraging states to pass red flag laws, which are very dangerous, and I'll explain that in a moment. The other part of it is more funding for mental health care, the background checks for anyone below the age of 21. That includes their juvenile records, which means juvenile records would be unsealed for some people, which is again a violation of their constitutional rights. And so we have. There's not much in there that goes to the notion of controlling actual manufacturing or thing. Now, the Department of Interior is doing a lot right now to start restricting the use of lead in ammunition on federal land, and that is that the new regulations have been published on that. But back to the bill, it's not as anti-Second Amendment as many people thought it would be. And I do think that the Republicans feel the heat a little bit, and I think John Cornyn from Texas, it is not surprising that a Texas senator would step up and want to be part of some compromise. Now, what this does is it'll hold the line for a while. The issue is the red flag laws. That to me is the most dangerous aspect. When you then allow legislators to then determine a particular class of people that you can go in and confiscate their guns, I guarantee you that will be abused. That will be abused because sooner or later, anyone who is a conservative will be considered someone who will come under the authority of red flag laws, and people will come and get conservatives' guns. I guarantee it. I guarantee it.
I don't doubt that a bit. I don't doubt that. I mean, look at that freak show that is Beto O'Rourke. You can laugh at him if you want, but there's a lot of people who support him. They support his antics, the foolishness, the vanity and foolishness of somebody like Beto O'Rourke. People actually support it.
Yep. No, I think that there are the dangers of this are any time, and this is one of the reasons I was so adamantly opposed to the Homeland Security Act of 2002, on all of the FISA issues when the Patriot Act, and because all of those, I looked at when I read those bills, I looked in there and I said, this will be abused. Sooner or later, the government will abuse this. Because anytime you give authority to the government to take away liberty, they will take it away. And it is the, I think that is the one thing I was thinking about today before I came on with you. I was thinking about this whole notion about liberty and security and the balancing act that a lot of people take. And what we have is a lot of people are afraid to fight for liberty. And that liberty, if once taken, it's impossible to get back. And that because government will never cede power back to the people.
Oh, no.
Never, never. And that is why you should never give power to the government when liberty is at stake.
That's a good point, Sam. Sam Clovis is our guest, AM 1400 KBFT, the voice of Fort Dodge. We're in an unusual time. That's kind of politically correct. We're in a dangerous time. The Biden people are dangerous. You and I have talked before about elder abuse with Joe Biden. He's just a figurehead.
Yes.
I talked with Chuck Grassley a little bit earlier today, and I asked Senator Grassley about then Senator Biden. And he said, well, I served with Joe Biden for 25 or 30 years, and I was able to work with Senator Biden. He made some suggestion like, I don't know who President Biden is. He's completely different than he's got into this office.
Well, I agree with that, but I also think that we've seen the decline of Joe Biden going back to the beginning of the Obama administration. So we've had 12 years or now 14 years to watch this slide. And I don't know what the condition is with Joe Biden, but I know that his faculties are not sharp. I wonder what drugs they have him on to keep him propped up for those time periods when it's necessary for him to be in public. There's something wrong with him in the fact that he cannot seem to be able to recall factual issues. He may be a pathological liar anyway, but he doesn't seem to be able to recall facts. He doesn't seem to be able to argue or put logical sentences together. He does not have the ability to react with the calmness. If you notice in the press conferences how easily piqued he is, how easy it is to provoke him. That is not a good sign for a person who has his finger on the nuclear button. Now, many would argue that Donald Trump was very much the same, but Donald Trump was more flash than heat.
Yeah.
I think that with Joe Biden, the flash you get is heat. And I do think that it's a vengeful, focused, deliberate issue, because I think he struggles. If he can't figure out what it is he's supposed to do or say, then I think he really struggles, and it becomes a very defensive reaction, and that is not good.
Well, you and I are close to the same age, Sam, and I'll tell you, in my late 50s and early 60s, I noticed I couldn't handle aggravation as I used to. And I think it's followed me into my 70s now.
Well, I've been just the opposite. That's
really
surprising. Yeah. I was very intense and very, I wouldn't say short-tempered, but I didn't suffer fools very well in my 40s and 50s. I would say that after I got into my 60s and I started to age, I started to have a little bit more patience. And I will tell you this: after getting sick, my patience quotient has expanded enormously because I've had to be very patient with myself because of the infirmities that I have. I have to be very, very careful about how I do things. So that requires a tremendous amount of patience. And that has carried over into my relationships with other people. So I've had just the opposite. and that they're relevant. That's the other issue that I think is really sticks in their craw, is that they're not relevant.
No.
It's a lot like the sports stars and entertainers today. After the pandemic, they're not relevant. The fact that you've seen a tremendous decline in the favorability of people, of athletes and entertainers, and the issue there is that nobody cares what they think about a political issue or anything else, is because what they say doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter now. That doesn't mean that reality TV and sports aren't popular, because I'm a baseball fanatic, so I'll watch mixed co-ed slow pitch softball if that's what's on TV. Because I love it. I love the game that way and that kind of thing. But I don't care what Joe Madden or Girardi or any of the managers like to have to say about whether or not they're against guns or not. I don't care. I don't care about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee because he's not relevant. It doesn't matter what he thinks. It does not matter what he thinks. The fact that he uses his celebrity to protest and to do that, I think it's up to the ownership of whatever club hires him, and no one has, as a matter of fact. So there must be something there that is detracting from his desirable attributes on the. Now they'll give the highest dollar contract in history to Deshaun Watson, who has only got 66 women come forward against him, and so I don't think that I'm going to take anything on moral or virtue signaling from the NFL or LeBron James or anyone else. The issues that I see going forward is I trust the American people, and I always have. I think that we get it wrong once in a while, but in the long run, we usually get it right. And I trust the American people far more than I trust Liz Cheney or LeBron James or Tiger Woods or Colin Kaepernick or anyone else for that matter.
Liz Cheney, are you ready for this? Said on television that her election is crucial to the preservation of democracy in the United States of America. Wyoming has one congressional seat, but she's got to be in it or the country is going to collapse, according to Liz. That is vanity. That is just from outer space.
Hubris. That's worse than vanity. It's hubris, and that is the level of arrogance that has no support. And so that this goes to the whole issue of the sense of entitlement and the fact that she thinks she plays a role, that somebody cares what she thinks. Nobody cares what she thinks.
Well,
and I mean nobody.
Well, all of a sudden, Liz Cheney is just the most wonderful person in the world, according to the Democratic Party. Also, Dick Cheney has been seen surrounded by some known Democrats, and they're all patting him on the back like he's just the most wonderful guy. They hated Cheney. Cheney hasn't changed his views at all. And
well, they wanted to have Cheney up on war crimes.
Yes, among other things. It's just bizarre.
Well, I think it goes to that it's a matter of utility for the Democrats. If you're useful, then they'll come over and try to be nice to you. If you're not useful, then they'll vilify you and isolate you and pull a Saul Alinsky on you. Yeah. So that's the approach that the Democrats take on almost everything, and it's all a matter of utility. If you're useful, then they're with you. If you're not, then they could care less about you.
Sam Clovis is our guest. This is AM 1400 KVFT, the voice of Fort Dodge. I want to run something by you. I've been talking about on the air about moral relativism and the extreme moral relativism that the Democratic Party and certainly Joe Biden have embraced. Maybe not Joe Biden. He doesn't really know what it is, but
Right.
at this stage in his life. But when you try to take over our schools and indoctrinate children into some sort of transgender future, that's beyond the pale. I guess what I'm trying to get to is moral relativism in and of itself is completely unprincipled. And if you're acting in an unprincipled way, there's only one reason. You are on a mad quest for power. This is a pure drive for power. And that's what the Democratic Party is most concerned about. If you listen to them, if you listen to Nancy Pelosi and that appalling Chuck Schumer, they are unprincipled moral relativists in search of absolute power.
Well, they lack a moral compass, and
Yes,
that is absolutely correct. There is no moral grounding in them. They have the ends do justify the means, and I think that this is the ends are power. The end is power, and therefore any means to get there, which then requires you to throw away any semblance of moral compass that you may have. Now, it's ironic in that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi both come from religious backgrounds that are astoundingly focused on morality.
Yes,
and the fact that they hide behind that whenever they are challenged on these issues, and Schumer is Jewish and Pelosi is Catholic, and I think that you run into this whole that you talk about moral relativism. If you're dealing in the orthodoxy of either of those religions, of those sects, you will find that the moral compass is paramount, and in fact that is the absolute. There is an absolute. There is good and there is evil. There is a way forward. There is a path that one must follow. There are strict rules about how do you conduct your life, and the fact that they don't seem to be able to grasp that or choose to ignore it tells me that they have no moral compass to begin with, and they've forgotten everything they ever learned in school or in their catechism. So that to me is why this is why I think that those people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and those two in particular, are as despicable human beings as there are on this earth.
Oh, I think so. I'm even willing to forgive Chuck Schumer a little bit, because inherent in Judaism is the idea of tolerance. Tolerance is a very strong thing within mainstream Judaism. Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden have been walking around for years talking about how Catholic they are. And I'm glad some bishops and cardinals are actually standing up for their faith and refusing, in some cases, communion to Nancy Pelosi. And of course, Nancy Pelosi, as far as the Bishop of San Francisco, she just dismissed the bishop of her own church. She did. I don't care.
Well,
I really
don't care. Yeah. Well, I because she must think that she has her own brand of Catholicism, and or that she sides with the socialist that happens to be the Holy Father, and because the Pope right now is a socialist, and he's an avowed socialist, and make no mistake about it. And he raised an entire generation of priests around him that are responsible for radical liberation theology, and that has migrated into North American Catholicism. And so I think that this is we're not surprised at this. And finally, there is a tremendous number in the clergy in the United States that adhere to this. The other part of it is that this is one of the reasons I have such a hard time with Catholicism today, and I'm Catholic, and as you know, and the fact that they abet illegal activity, and they have forgotten the lessons of the New Testament, and that is that we render under Caesar that which is Caesar's, and we render under God that which is God's. And I think that there is, and I don't want to hang on one verse, but I do think that the lesson there is that when Jesus said, "Pick up the coin," and what face is on the coin? Well, the coin, the money, the face is Caesar's. And so what he's saying is that there is a government, and the government there, and the lessons of the Old Testament say that the government exists because God says it does. And that is and God allows that government to exist. And when I think that to the notion of separation of church and state, I don't think that really means that we take the church out of the town square. What it means is the state can't establish a religion, and that's what it means. And so I have a hard time with politicians who play fast and loose with morality and then lecture us on issues when they don't seem to have a moral center themselves. This was my main criticism of Barack Obama. I thought he was amoral. I didn't think he had a scintilla of morality about him at all. Not at all.
You must have not met Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton stands out in my mind as the most amoral president we've ever had. Him and his wife both. I think it was obvious that they had some sort of elemental drive for power. And I was talking about this in the last half hour regarding Donald Trump and his refusal to acknowledge that he lost. They just they don't care. The Clintons do not care. They want power. They'll do anything to get power, say anything to get power. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is unprincipled moral relativism, I guess on steroids is a popular expression now.
Right. I would agree. But money and power. That's what it's all about.
That's what it is about the Clintons. That's for sure. Let's not forget, by the way, that San Francisco is Spanish for St. Francis. It was a Catholic city many years ago. I mean, many years ago.
Right.
It's now the most liberal city in the country. I understand that. But I think if Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and others who have been claiming to be Catholic for many years would finally come clean and say, well, look, we don't care what the church says. It's inconvenient for me politically. So I'm going to drop any pretense that I'm Catholic or obey the Catholic faith or the moral restraints of the faith and just do whatever it takes for me to be elected, because that's the real truth. That's the absolute real truth. By the way, San Francisco was a beautiful city the last time I was there, but that's been many years ago. And from what I understand, it's just a piece of crap now. I mean, human feces in the streets in many neighborhoods. It's just people sleeping in the street. I don't mean in doorways. I mean on the streets.
Right.
They just collapse there.
It's been since 1968 since I've been there. So that, and I remember we were at Hamilton Field on a field trip, and my roommate and I took a bus downtown, and we got off at the corner of Haight and Ashbury.
Oh, look out!
And San Francisco,
I didn't know you were an old hipster. What were you wearing a headband, Sam? I can't visualize.
No, I was in a gray slacks, white shirt, striped tie, and blue blazer. So
boy,
yeah, we didn't stick out at all.
Not at all.
No,
not at all.
It was no, we didn't stick out at all. 2 18-year-old kids from the Midwest, So we were. Yeah, my roommate was from. His name's Tom Barry, and Tom was from St. Louis, and he'd gone to Christian Brothers, which is one of the more famous Catholic schools
Sure.
in the country. And so he went to Christian Brothers there in St. Louis, and I was raised in Kansas, so we were just a couple of kids that that we got thrown together at the academy, and we were roommates, and so Tom and I decided to go downtown, and we had a wonderful day. I mean, it was marvelous. There was nothing, and this was 1968, so it was at the height of the Vietnam War protests and everything else, and we never had one disparaging word said to us. Not one. Now I will tell you, we were offered everything, and I mean everything you can imagine, in our strolls up and down the streets there in that neighborhood. And it was very eye-opening for a couple of 18-year-old kids. But it was a wonderful day, and we had a great evening. And we ended up taking the streetcar down to the wharf, and we ate at the restaurant called the Cannery. And it was expensive, but it was worth it. And then we made our way back to Hamilton and on a bus, and it was just a remarkable day, and I've never forgotten it. It was one of the most extraordinary days of my life.
I'll tell you, I get a lot of online newspapers. I get the Wall Street Journal, I get the New York Times, I get several, Des Moines Register, of course, Cedar Rapids Gazette, and I read them for my job. Of course, this is what I do. And I thought, well, I'm going to try to get the San Francisco Chronicle just for a month. I'll try it for a month. Because I knew it was going to be way more than I thought. I thought it was going to be way more than I'd be able to handle, just a lot of way outer space opinions and all that sort of thing. Instead, I found some very good writing and reporting, mainly that San Francisco, they make no apologies, and they're glad that San Francisco is such a liberal city, but Chessie Bowden's got to go. And maybe even the mayor needs to be recalled because they're turning the city into a cesspool. Right. And lo and behold, they did recall Chessie Bowden, or is that how his name is pronounced? Who was the very liberal district attorney who was turning very dangerous people back on the street and doing nothing about drug problems and all these sorts of things. So I'm glad I tuned in to the San Francisco Chronicle.
Well, I think one of the big issues in California right now, and San Francisco and Los Angeles both, is the fact that they're not arresting anybody for crimes up to $1,000. So you can go into a store and steal up to $1,000, and they're not going to even arrest you. I mean, they're not even going to stop you. And you ask yourself, how in the world is that possible that you abet crime that way? And I think that this is why you see the incredible. Finally, even liberals can't tolerate that, because I think when you abet crime and you turn people out, and they go back to crime, then I think that you have really missed the boat as far as what the role of government is about. And the role of government, the first and most paramount role of government, is to protect its citizens. That is number one. And if you don't do that, then nothing else you do matters.
That's right. Sam Clovis, Sam, we're going to have to go, but I appreciate you being on. This is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge.